Okay, I'd like to call to order the Urban Design Commission meeting for Wednesday, July 8th. We'll begin with roll call.
Douglas Gasick.
Here.
James Doherty.
Here.
Juan Ania.
Here.
Mark Kimmerer.
Here.
Patricia Joyner.
Here.
Patrick Coleman.
Here.
Peter Briggs. Alan Kemplin. And that's it.
Okay, next item is minutes. In the packet we have the minutes for the Wednesday, June 10th, 2009 meeting. I get a motion to approve. It's moved and seconded. Any objection to passing? Seeing and hearing none, the minutes will stand as written. Special order of business, do we have any disclosures for tonight? So, would that be electronic? Any?
I have a disclosure to make for case 2009-005. Should it come off the consent agenda and be pulled for the regular agenda, I would need to excuse myself from that case, as the petitioning landscape architecture firm is Land Design North, my employer.
Yeah, and I think we've got a precedent for that. Any other disclosures? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have a motion to approve it. Let's see. Did you hit it? Okay. Apologize to the people present. We're using new software for the first time tonight. So it's been moved by Commissioner Ania and seconded. Any opposition to passing? Hearing and seeing none, consent agenda passes. We have no unfinished business, so we are moving on to the regular agenda. Case 2008-111, landscape plan review for highway screening. We hear from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the case for the approval of the screening provisions for major highways for UDC case number 2008-111, Conquest Acres subdivision. This case was reviewed by the Commission last year in 2008. At that time, the Commission moved that the petitioner should submit a landscape plan that would be in compliance with UDC screening provisions for major highways. They are now back tonight with that landscape plan. Sheet 3 of 3 indicates the existing species and size of the trees in the screening area. The tree list and shrub list on sheet 2 of 2 identifies the existing trees and notes the number of trees and shrubs needed to meet the requirements of the highway screening provisions. The resubmitted landscape plan shows compliance with the requirements of screening provisions for major highways. Note number 6 indicated the use of a native seed mix. However, the plans do not indicate the composition of the seed mix. There are only 2 substantive comments. One I've just mentioned regarding the native seed mix, and then the third one is contact planning department staff prior to planting to ensure compliance with the landscape plan. And if you look on page 27 of your packet, those 4 items are outlined. Under number 2, it's 2A, B, C, and D. So they will contact me prior to planting, and then I'll go out and look at the trees to make sure those items are taken care of. That's all I have.
Any questions for staff? Is there a representative from the petitioner who'd like to make a presentation?
For the native seed mix, we decided to use a Schedule B wildflower mix from the Muni spec.
Sorry, could you state who you are and
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry.
representing?
I'm Jamie Keller from PMD Engineers, and I'm representing the Cronquists. That's all I have.
I guess I missed that. What was your comment? You've seen the staff recommendations.
Yes, they'll use the wildflower seed mix, Schedule B, from the UNI's specifications.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner? Okay. Thank you. So we'll entertain a motion.
I have a question. On page 27, it says the trees shall not be planted until planning department staff has inspected the trees, including the root balls, embrace and tree tags. We've been already planted like well over 100 trees on our property, and I've never had anybody come out and inspect them. I mean, we haven't had a problem with planting them. I was just wondering what the purpose of that
You want to
was.
address that? I think it has to do, well, go ahead, Sharon.
Yes, I'm happy to address that. In the past, the trees didn't meet the specifications. They didn't match what the landscape plan said. They were all smaller, significantly smaller than what the landscape plan said. So this time I wanted to ensure that we don't have a repeat of that. So the best way is to have an inspection prior to planting. Then we can avoid any of those issues.
They met all the requirements last year. Some were a bit shorter, but I believe Jerry Weaver, is that your boss? He said we could average them in because some are 30 feet high. And
Yes, but we're trying to start over clean so we don't have the problems we've had in the past there.
Excuse me, ma'am. Could you state your name for the record, please?
Jerry Cronquist,
Thank you.
owner.
Well, that triggers some clarification. My understanding is that the petitioner is fine with the conditions that have been put forth. Is that not true? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Hal Cronquist. Question I have, many of the trees that are existing here that I planted are 18 feet high. Yes, there are some of them that are right now are 6 to 7 feet. And I'm understanding they're not counting those as trees now. They're going to try to count them as shrubs. And I think that's ridiculous. I mean, these trees, probably by fall or next spring, they will be 8 feet high. And many of them right now are much taller than that. And it should be an average of 8 feet, and it's probably more than that.
Well, I guess the issue that I have, again, is we have been given a packet showing a landscape plan for what is proposed in the buffer. That has been reviewed by staff, and they've approved everything. They have a couple of conditions on here. But basically, the reason this has come back is last time we didn't have a landscape plan to review. Now we have a landscape plan that is in compliance with all of the codes. We basically said that if you brought that and it was in compliance, we'd see it and we'd approve it. And I think it's important for us to understand that you plan to build what's on this plan and you plan to do it according to these provisions. What you've just said leads me to believe that you're planning on varying somewhat or deviating from the plan that we have.
No, I'm not, but the trees that are existing now, that was planted 2 years ago, are not quite 8 feet high. And I'm understanding that we're not counting those as trees now, they're going to try to count them as shrubs. I don't think that's right. I mean, the trees that we're going to plant, I will plant them by whatever the codes are saying. But it's the trees that are already there. Many of them are 18 feet high, and some of them are 6 feet high. But they certainly average more than 10 feet.
Sharon, what's the nature of the discrepancy?
I'm clear. Ms. Keller, the representative, has done the tree and shrub count. It's on page 3 of the packet. She and I discussed that. There's emails in the packet to show our discussion back and forth. We both agreed on that, so I'm not sure what Mr. Cronquist is questioning at this point.
I just found out tonight that these 40 trees or 30 trees that was planted 2 years ago were not being counted as trees, they're being counted as shrubs. I wasn't aware of that till tonight. So I think it should be considered that they are trees.
My understanding of this whole situation is that there was a misinterpretation of what was required. The plans were not followed from the original construction drawings, and a complaint was filed. And as a result, the city, the staff has taken a look at what your situation is and has worked out with your designer what would need to be done in order for it to meet all of the code. That is reflected here in this design. So all of the number of trees, the size of the trees, all of that stuff has been worked out to be in compliance with the code. And my understanding is that if we approve this plan and you build according to this plan, this issue goes away and everything will be in compliance. And so, it's important for us to understand that you're not asking to deviate from this plan, because our understanding is that all of that work has been done, the groundwork has been done with the designer and the city to get a plan that's mutually acceptable.
Okay.
So you're going to build according to this plan? Okay. So I'm still waiting for a motion. Moved by Commissioner Kimmer, seconded by Commissioner Ania. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure. I move to approve UDC case 2008-111 as meeting the screening provisions for major highways and for UDC review. It looks like they've taken a good look at what they have and what they need to do to meet code, and I'm happy to see this move forward.
So got out of order there. It was actually the motion that I wanted to hear. We needed to hear that motion before we could second it. And so now it's been seconded. Now could you speak?
Yes. Do I need to say move to approve?
Did you include the comments from staff?
I did not. I'll start over.
Okay.
I move to approve UDC case 2008-111 as meeting approval or final review of UDC screening provisions for major highways with department recommendations 1 through 3 to be included.
Do we have a second? We do. Commissioner Ania. Please speak to your motion.
Thank you. It looks like the petitioner has had time and had some professional advice on putting a plan together that will meet code, and I look forward to seeing it implemented.
Any other comments? Any objection to approving? Seeing and hearing none, motion passes. So other than we don't really have any other business on the agenda, I thought that maybe since we have the folks that have reprogrammed the software here, they can maybe give us a tutorial on how this works. Maybe. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that this was like in. Okay. For demonstration purposes, they'd like us to conclude our business so they can do some sort of mock presentation. Does anybody have any reports or any other comments? So.
I have a few things I wanted to say, but are we at that point yet? Are we under reports?
Well, it's kind of in order for them to do the demonstration, they'd like us to be done with our business, so they can do some sort of mock thing.
Got it.
So I guess if there's any reports or anything like that, we could just get those out of the way and then have our demo.
Do you want to go, Patricia, or should I start on mine? Or
Well, I thought Alan would be here. I don't know if anybody besides Alan and I were at the Robert Liberty presentation on transportation and land use last week. It was sort of at the last minute. He's from Portland, and he's been here before during the comprehensive plan work, I think. And he didn't give us anything, but it was a very interesting talk, and the room was full and running over with people, so there was a lot of interest in the concept of land use planning comes first and transportation's built around it. And he used examples in Portland area of big highways being proposed and some being built and some not, and finding alternatives that was related to our highway-to-highway project and also the bridge across the inlet. And the questions we need to be asking aren't how do you build a highway from here to there shouldn't be the first question, but how do we move people to their employment or other places, and what we want our quality of life to be like. There are other questions to ask besides how do we build a road from this point to that point. And he talked about some ideas I thought were new, where we look at moving people from A to B on a large scale, where the highway, it's from the Glen Highway to the Seward Highway. But in Portland, they found when they tried to do that most of the transportation was actually short trips within that. And when they built the highway, they cut all the transportation routes people were using. And it actually made it a lot more difficult because most people weren't going from end point to end point. Most people were going back and forth in between. But it was just a nice discussion of things that we should think about. And I know Alan's talked about that concept a lot, so I thought he would be here tonight and mention it, and I'm just doing it in his absence.
What I wanted to say is that at last month's meeting, if you'll recall, we had the sign variance case before you, and the commission decided to deny the sign variance request, but you didn't make any findings on that case. And you have to make findings for every case. It's a legal obligation. For each case has to have findings. But particularly when you do a denial, it's critical that there are findings made. And I take partial blame because I didn't remind you about that and I didn't say anything at the time. But the petitioner has appealed the decision. I don't know if he will actually pursue it and it will go forward, but from here it will likely go to Superior Court. When it gets to Superior Court, they're going to look at what happened and the procedure. They're going to see that there were no findings. They will probably return the case back to the UDC because there were no findings, and so they don't know what you all were thinking and why you denied the case because there's no findings on record. So.
Is there any corrective action that can be taken? What's done is done?
Not yet. What's done is done. We can't do anything after the fact. But he may not, pursue it. Well, I think once he finds out, he has to go to Superior Court and what's going to be involved in that, because he will have to, prepare things to take, as well as the department will have to take things to prepare it. He may or may not go forward with it, but he did ask. We send out a form letter after every case saying your case so-and-so has been approved or your case so-and-so has been denied, and you have 20 days to, if you want to put an appeal in, you've got 20 days to do so. He just simply wrote a one-sentence letter saying he wants to appeal the case. I think he may not know what's involved. But we don't know at this point. So I've sent him a follow-up letter and telling him, explaining what he has to do at this point. So we'll see what happens. But on variances, when you have to make findings, there are 6 standards. And the easiest way to do it is just to take the arguments that are in the staff report and say, on standard number 1, we find that, I find that standard number 1 was not met for such and such reason. You can just take that directly out of staff report. That's the easiest way. If you have your own reasoning, then use that also. And then you say standard number 2, I find was not met for this and this reason, or was partially met for this and this reason, or was met for this and this reason. And you have to go down and do each standard and explain why or why not, they meet that standard or don't, so that there's a record at the end of the...
How is that actually done? If you're talking about the ruling of the commission, does that come in terms of discussion on the motion?
Yes. Once you make the motion, then you go down, and then once it's somebody makes a motion, somebody then seconds it, and then it goes back to the person who made the motion to go down them one by one. And then it should be at least 2 or 3 commissioners who do the same thing. The first person who's going to do it is the one who made it, the finding, and then another commissioner will go through all 6 again, or they'll say, I agree with Commissioner on 1 through 3, their reasonings, but on 4 and 5, I'm going to add this to it.
Is this only applicable to something like a denial, or is this something that we should do on every...
denial, because that's the case where they can appeal it and where there has to be a record, but you all need to do findings with every case. Maybe only 1 or 2 commissioners need to say something, but on a denial for a variance, or a denial of any case, not even a variance, but any kind of denial, there has to be a record in case, because there are appeal procedures. For a variance, it would probably go to Superior Court. For a site plan, it would probably go to either Planning and Zoning Commission or the Board of Adjustment. But there is an appeal process for every case if it's a denial. But we have to have a record as to why the commission denied it. What were your reasonings?
So when you say finding, do people actually use that word? Because there was some discussion after the motion was made, and you can't extract findings from that discussion.
As I recall, somebody just said it was Juan who made the motion to deny. Somebody seconded, I think it was Doug, and that was it. There was no findings made. So, and I take blame for that too. I should have said something, but.
So it's very important from a legal standpoint on variances, but if I heard you correctly, it's very important on everything that we do, whether we're approving or denying.
Right.
To substantiate the decisions that have been made. I guess the fine point on it is if we're going to do something that is, and denials are more significant because there's the potential for appeals, does that require everybody to kind of go down the line and make that recitation, or is one person's findings adequate? I mean, how does that work?
If we're approving it, I think if 2 people cited the reasons why they approve it, it meets code, blah, 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 meets certain comp plan, then that's fine. But if it's a denial, then it has to be very strong, the reasons for the denial. And I would say 3 is the minimum number of commissioners that need to chime in to say the reasons for the denial. And if they, want to take it straight out of the staff packet, that's fine. And if you're saying the same thing the commissioner ahead of you said, that's fine. It just makes a stronger case that, 3 people are in agreement that these are our reasons why we're denying it.
And these findings and these statements would be made before the vote is taken?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So those would be made when you ask to speak to the motion.
Right, and that's to support, is basically put something on record that showed why you're voting the way that you're voting.
So it'd probably be a good idea for the seconder to speak to it as well, just to get the ball rolling. And then
right, and I think what Sharon says is it's less of an issue on approval because no one's going to challenge that. But any time when we deny something, we want to make sure our record is pretty robust in terms of the thinking behind the vote. And I overlooked that myself. So hopefully it won't be too big of a problem.
We had training a long time ago with the municipal attorney and talked about that, and we did it for a while, but there's probably only 3 of us left. And I remember thinking of it vaguely when we were doing that, but we always get these things written up that say the findings, even though we didn't say it. So I assumed with that, too, that someone took it from the minutes and wrote it up as findings. So now we know.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of spoon feeding that can go on. I think staff does try to help us out when talking about things being in compliance with the comp plan and things like that. And
right.
We just need to go through the extra step of restating what they've teed up there in the report. Okay. Any other reports?
Yeah, I've got a few more things. Also at last month's meeting, there was when we were handling the other highway screening, it was the Polaris case, and Kevin Denier was here and Peter was acting as chair for that case. I think the UDC got into a discussion mode rather than, the UDC asks the question and the petitioner answers the questions, and we limit it to that. I think when Kevin was here, he wanted to have more of a discussion over the issues, and the UDC just cannot get into a discussion. It gets kind of out of control, and we go into kind of inappropriate territory that we have to keep really limited to. You guys ask the question, and the petitioners answer the questions, and it really doesn't range beyond that. It's just the safest, cleanest way to run a meeting, and we don't get into a lot of tangential and. I mean, if Kevin wants to discuss issues of code, then there are other forums to do that. We don't do it, at a public meeting to evaluate, the effectiveness of a code or whether the code is appropriate or any those sort of discussions.
We had, I can recall meetings in the past where Elise or somebody would stay after the cases are heard and then have a general discussion of that nature, and that would probably be where we'd want to
more
something
appropriate,
like that.
but not, when we're, dealing with the case. Two more things. One is the vacancy. We, of course, have a new mayor, and he has a new staff. So this morning I got in touch with the new person who's in charge of filling all the vacancies on all the boards and commissions. There are some 60 of them. And so I sent over a resume for a civil engineer that I hope the mayor chooses. And I just wanted to give you an update on that. And then the issue of bringing the water bottles. Do you all want me to continue to do that? I'm, dragging them over here and then dragging them back, and it seems most of you are not drinking the water. And there's all kinds of environmental issues now with the water bottles, and a lot of municipalities are banning them. So my question is, do you still want me to bring the water over or not? What's your feeling?
Are we going to do food?
I don't know that that's changed. I don't know where we are on that issue yet. I haven't
That was only the one real clear message that we sent to the new administration.
Okay. Yeah, I can do a cup. That's easy.
Yeah, let's do what we can to be environmentally correct. I think there's a drinking fountain somewhere around here.
Right, there is. It's down there by the bathrooms at the end of the hall. Okay, is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
I just have a comment on the case for the highway screening, Kevin's. I mean, when he's up there and he's basically saying, he would like us to think about that. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was just the circumstances and Peter wasn't, being used to be actively being the chair. Mm-hmm. But I do see your point, but it's a difficult thing to look at somebody kind of straight in the eye and say, well, we don't even entertain that,
I know, and it's all the more difficult because the number, the landscape architects in town are a very small number, and everybody knows each other and everybody's friends with each other, so it makes it a bit more difficult. But, you have to put on your commissioner hat when he's here and stick to the proper procedure.
I think we strayed off a little bit. I thought we got back to what we'd learned in the past screening cases, which is we really don't have any leeway in these, which I believe is what we got back to. Mm-hmm. I think on that one it was very confusing because their site survey wasn't accurate, and that started raising questions and made it very confusing. And I personally thought they should have come back with an accurate survey and reapplied for review.
Right. And then even Kevin, when he got up to speak, he says, I want to have a discussion about this, and that's the first sign right there. There's no room for that sort of thing during the meeting.
I had a comment on that because I had that concern that night, and it was hard because Peter hadn't led a meeting before and wasn't here, but it's several years ago with not Kevin but the same petitioner. And I think with the Target, we got into these long, long meetings that went on back and forth for more than an hour. And at that point, as a commission, decided, no, you ask questions, they answer them, and then you close it, and then we have a discussion among ourselves about the things. But it just wasn't working to have them come and think they're convince us at this point, because that's what's supposed to happen at the staff level, and then they should bring it to us. So things worked much better having seen both, that you ask the questions and then you close it and then you have a discussion among the commission. I think it's hard sometimes, but it does work better. And
I don't see that we really, I guess we have those discussions after the motion is made. Is that when those discussions would, we close it out and then we get to chat and then make a motion?
Well, I think that the formal process is that once the petitioner has had all the questions answered, then it goes directly to a motion, and then all the discussion happens after the motion is sort of on the floor, which is kind of strange. I mean, that's not really a discussion, but I think if you do it right, it can get everybody's ideas out and heard. But it does seem a little strange, it's like, push it forward and then discuss it. But
I think part of the purposes of the discussion, if it's a controversial issue, the discussion lets the other commissioners know the direction that particular commissioner is going to vote. And so they're all thinking, how this is all going to play out in the end. So when you're discussing it, you're really bringing up, your concerns with the case, and then often commissioners will say, I support this motion or I don't support this motion and the reasons why.
so, I mean, in the ideal meeting, if there was an unlimited amount of time, every commissioner would say why they're voting the way they're voting on every case. And then the record would contain that.
Right. I mean, if it's something pretty cut and dry, it may not be necessary. But if something, a more complex case, then yes, every commissioner should if it's a complex case.
If everybody that came, there were other people here think, oh, you can just come in and then bring up other things that haven't been looked at and you don't have all the details and they're just thinking on their feet, oh, well, I'm going to try this and then I'm going to try that. We'll be here forever.
Well, and I think we've seen in the past, too, that it starts to blur the clarity of what we're supposed to be doing, and we think that we're supposed to be deciding on, whether or not this case needs to follow the code or not, or, whether we're going to grant some sort of discretionary leniency, and then everything sort of gets gray. So, all right, any other business? I'll entertain a motion for adjournment, realizing that you guys are going to have to stick around and listen to this training. So how do I have to do? I have to be here, right? All right, removed, seconded. Any opposition? None. We're closed. Let the training begin.
Thank you, folks, for your time. We'll make it quick. I know you're all tired. All right.